Guys, I'm here with Ambroise Debret. How are you, Ambroise?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. We're in the Growth Hacking Geniuses series of the Business Growth Geniuses community and brand. We're doing a lot of interviews and live AMAs like this one, and it's a privilege to have Ambroise on this show again. I mean, we did the interview before, but it's a privilege to have him again because he does have a really good reputation online and is considered as one of the really influenceable growth hackers, not just for business growth, but also for life and travel and different aspects. So I think we're going to have a chance today to talk about a few different topics, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Matt.
Awesome, it's a pleasure. So just for people watching this that don't know who the hell Ambroise is, I have a short intro here and then I have some questions prepared, but then we're going to jump probably to some other topics that are related a little bit to his expertise. So Ambroise is an entrepreneur passionate about growth and optimization, whether it's about digital marketing and business, life, or travel, like I mentioned. He is currently working on Make It Run, his startup that brings together athletes and sports events via race recommendation, as well as his blog, ambroisedebret.com. We'll spell that out later. And MTL Plus e-commerce, the largest monthly e-commerce event, which has been running for quite a while. For how long?
About 6 years.
Impressive. Okay, so you have an active role still in that those events?
Yeah, I'm still part of the main organizers, and I do the panels, and I'm basically emceeing the event.
Gotcha. And I remember very well when I went to one of your events, and then I got the chance to play piano at the end of the event, which was sweet.
Yeah, we should do that again.
We should. You should get a grand piano in every single event. All right, so let's get started. So today's topic is about the main topic, let's say, I'm sure we're going to touch on other topics, but the main topic we're going to start with is how to reach out and connect with and build relationships with busy, successful entrepreneurs. So first of all, what's the link between, before we really talk about that specifically, what's the link between life hacking, growth hacking, travel hacking, personal branding, and more generally, everything that you blog about? So a little bit of context, basically, about what you're doing.
All right. So like I said in my bio, I'm a big fan of optimization and growth. And I like applying that in digital marketing with growth hacking, events, and stuff like that. I also like to optimize a lot of parts of my life. And basically, I'm always experimenting in whether it's in digital marketing or my life. And so basically, I share my experiments and findings with others via my blog. So for instance, I've just written a blog post about how to automate your personal finance. So making sure your credit cards are paid on time, creating systems so that people pay you back and you get a hold of your finances. And I've also written about like productivity, how to reach famous people, which I think we'll talk about later. And yeah, you said it's about improving everything. So whether it's your current life, growing your business, working from abroad as a digital nomad, travel hacking. Because for me, growth hacking is more than just like a trend or a buzzword. It's really a mindset you can apply anywhere. And in my interview with Vin Clancy, who I think you also had an interview with, I asked him if he thought that growth hackers were also life hackers, and he said that he thought so. So it's really a mindset.
So it's a mindset that applies to every aspect of your life and business, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, let's dive into the actual subject that we want to talk about. Busy and successful people get a lot of requests from people to connect with them, whether it's on LinkedIn, email, different channels. So what's allowing you to stand out above that noise and for them to also make it interesting for them to want to connect with you?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. I think a lot of people in the online world focus on quantity. When with the influencers, you should focus on quality. So people are receiving a lot of like spam-like outreach emails sent via different tools online. And I think the key to build relationships is to differentiate yourself from all that noise that's around. So you can do that by many ways. So there is the channel where with which you reach out. So a lot of people use emails, phone calls, going to meetings in person. Those are great ways, but you can also like experiment with other channels. So for instance, it's pretty easy to reach people via Facebook Messenger. You can also use LinkedIn with the email, is it called emails? Yeah. If you have the pro account, you have a certain number of emails. So try to be creative in the ways where you outreach influential people. And no matter the channel, you always have some parts you have to take specific attention to. So if it's an email, you should really polish the email, the subject line, to make sure you catch their attention and you entice them to open the email. And I always like to start the emails with two things actually. So first, a genuine compliment about what they've done recently. If you've seen them in a news article or an interview, mention it, and also try to establish rapport. So if you know some people in common, mention them. If you've met them before, mention it, and make sure they understand that you're connected. Then you also, so busy people have very little time available to answer emails, especially from strangers. So make sure you make clear that you won't take too much of their time, so that the emails should be straight to the point, and you could mention that you'll be short, and get to the point about what you're going to ask, and provide a clear call to action. So I like to bold this sentence, the call to action, because that's really what you want them to read. And if you can get introduced by a common connection, it's always better. And also, I mentioned get to the point, but it's not necessarily asking for something. I think when you start a relationship with someone, you should try to give them value before asking something. So that goes back to the advice from Gary Vaynerchuk in his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. So you should try to give them things, give them value. If you see a news article that could be relevant to them that they wouldn't have seen, maybe email them the link to this article. So try to build value and then ask them for what you're going to ask.
How much time do you usually spend, researching the person, or thinking about what kind of value would be good for them, or like preparing basically for that email or that connection? How much time would you say is fair to invest into that one connection?
So there is the research part to research who you're going to reach out to. That can take a while depending on what your goal is. And then for me, there is the outreach section when you actually write the email or the message. And to be honest, it can take a while if you want to write the good email that doesn't look like a template and that's really around that people and what you're going to ask them. And
okay.
Yeah. And do you have any, because you reach out to many people for your show, do you have any other pieces of advice you could like to share?
Well, I think my one main idea that I'd like to connect to what you're saying is, when you're saying about giving value, for me with this show, Business Growth Geniuses and the 4 different topics that we cover, the offer in itself is valuable because it gives a platform for people to gain some visibility. Being interviewed also flatters the ego. It's a good offer, right? It's something that's perceived as quite valuable. You're asked to be on a show, it means, okay, like you feel important and you might get some traction from that, right? So in itself, I think the offer is interesting, but it just goes along with what you're saying about providing value, right? That's one way to provide value. And in your case, you mentioned, sending an article that could be helpful for them or something else. But I think having something of actual value to them, whatever that is, and maybe adapted based on the person, makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I'm doing the same. I mean, I have an interview series on my blog where I've interviewed Vin Clancy, Aaron Aegis, who you've also interviewed. And tomorrow I have an interview coming up with Nomadic Matt, who was the biggest travel blog. So it's always nice to build those relationships, even outside your usual zone, I'd say.
So you mentioned something about calls to action, in the email or the LinkedIn message. What is a typical call to action that you should have in there?
So I always try to build the call to action. So the first one is not the biggest call to action I'm gonna make. The first one should be a quick yes, an easy yes for me. So usually I ask the person if it's for MTL plus e-commerce to come as a speaker or do an interview or things like that. My call to action usually is something around the lines of are you in? Are you willing to do it? Are you motivated to do it? So that they just can answer yes, and then I have their yes, and I can work on the next call to action. That would be setting up the details of the interview, discussing about the topic they're going to talk about.
I'm assuming that you want that call to action to be as small as possible. You don't want to ask them for too much, especially if it's the first point of contact, right? The first email or the first message. You don't want to say, okay, spend a week thinking about something and working on something and send it to me. Like you want the call to action to be supposed, such as scheduling an interview or a call or something like that.
Yeah, you should make what you're asking of them pretty specific. So, for instance, the written interviews I have on my blog, they're 10 questions long. So I make sure to mention that so that they know it's not like a 1 hour form to fill, stuff like that. It's the same principles when you're sending out surveys to survey your audience. You want to make sure they know it's only 3 questions long. It won't take their whole afternoon. Or people get pretty scared of this, and they tend to overprotect their time. So make sure you mention that it's not going to take that much time.
Right. So what about the various platforms? So we mentioned email, LinkedIn, InMail on LinkedIn. What do you find works best, or even like a phone call or an in-person meeting? What do you find in your experience works best and is also the most practical and I guess scalable for you to connect with people? Which platforms?
Most practical and scalable would be email. Email is still email. It's pretty easy to find emails nowadays with tools like Find That Lead or Clearbit or stuff like that. So it's pretty easy to find an email. For people who who are pretty busy and pretty famous, I would try other ways. Twitter can be a nice way to reach out because the platform is built that way. So just mention someone with a question and try to get their email or try to have them contact you any other way. Facebook Live could also be a nice way to reach out. So for instance, if someone asked me a question right now during the interview, I would go back to that question in the comments and see it. So that's, for instance, why how I got to ask questions to Tim Ferriss, because he was doing periscopes and you could ask questions, because otherwise it's pretty much impossible.
Right.
So yeah.
That's an interesting idea. When that person is streaming live, you can interact with them to some degree. I mean, especially when they're open to receiving questions and having an exchange with the viewers, like this, for example, right? I mean, if someone asked you or me a question at this point, I would either answer it live or get back to it later. And I think at that point, it's easier to start building a relationship because we did connect somehow, right?
Yeah, because when you don't interrupt, the person is already talking about that topic. The person is available, so makes a lot of sense.
So you have to be a little bit creative to connect with really busy and successful people. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the key message here.
All right. How do you select the best people to connect with? Because I mean, there's billions of people on the planet. Let's say, millions and millions, hundreds of millions in North America. Let's say you want to connect with entrepreneurs. There's, hundreds of thousands of them. How do you select? What kind of criteria do you look at to decide who you want to connect with?
So I'd say there are a few. It always depends on what you want to achieve with that outreach. Do you want to promote a blog post? Do you want to ask for a link for SEO? Do you want to interview someone, etc.? So the approach is always a bit different, and the call to action will be different as well. So make sure you have a clear idea of why you're reaching out before you do your research, because it could also mean that you do your research on via specific filters on LinkedIn. If you have, let's say, a podcast and want to interview people in person in Montreal, you would look for I don't know, depending on your podcast, but for you it could be growth hackers in Montreal who have done X, Y, Z. So yeah, focus on on what you want to achieve. Then I would say also, think about if it's a just-in-time outreach or just in case. Because usually we tend to do just in case in outreach and say maybe will be useful to him or he'll be useful to us. But I think it's much more powerful to focus on the just in time outreach, so that you reach out to people with a clear call to action and some a next step basically, so that the relationship can flourish. And
can you expand a little bit more on that? What do you mean by just in time outreach?
Let's say you wanted to interview some people in another space, for instance, let's say for the example, travel hacking. I think you should start with the people who you already know from your network, you've seen online, etc. Because you have a connection with them already. You know them, maybe you've seen them at events and stuff like that. And those people you already know are much easier to interview or to get something from. So you always start with the next layer of your network, and you know you have something in common with them, versus some people who are on your far outer network, and that you might interview, but in a few years when you've done all your contacts and the contacts of your contacts. Like I feel like the referral part of it is pretty important. So if you interview me, for instance, a question you should ask me is, do you know some people like you who would like to be interviewed as well? Because it makes the job easy for you, and it's always relevant people.
It does, and actually Vin Clancy was through you, if I remember correctly, right? Because I asked you who else could be interesting to interview, and you said, well, how about this guy? He's coming to my event, and you should interview him, and that's how it happened. Right. Great. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the hacks, which is the topic of this live AMA. What are some of the hacks that would allow you to connect with those people that you've identified are really interesting? Now, how do you actually go about shortening the process, if you will? We know that sending an email on LinkedIn, if you're being creative, all that stuff can work. But are there any hacks besides that could help you?
I don't know if I would call them really hacks, but they're good practices and things you should work on. The first one would be personal branding. So if you reach out to some people who don't know you, and your message is good, you're different, etc. One of the first things they're gonna do is look you out online. So they're gonna type your name in Google, and if nothing comes up or nothing interesting to them comes up, they might not reply to email. Whereas if they type your name, they see you have a nice blog, you've interviewed people that they know, that you have 10,000 Twitter followers, that you have a Facebook page, etc. They might be more willing to accept, because depending on what you ask, if you're asking for an interview or stuff like that, they have the assurance that the interview they're going to do is going to be shared to your audience, and that they're going to reach new people that then are going to become their audience if they do the right job. So I'd say work on your personal brand, grow your social media accounts, build a personal website, all the things related to personal branding. Also have an email signature, like a professional image, stuff like that. And maybe the second thing I'd say is be persistent. That's something I told you in my first interview with Business Coach Genesis. Be persistent, be perseverant, because most people won't be perseverant. And you really have to follow up with those people because they're busy. Maybe they won't see the value you have to offer them the first time you send them an email or a LinkedIn message. But if you follow up, it shows determination up to a point. Don't abuse it. And what I usually like to do is, if I've sent them a few emails, they still have no answers. And if you know that they've opened your emails, you should use some stuff like HubSpot CRM to see if people open your emails, click them. If they haven't replied, but they've opened each of your emails you've sent them, maybe send them as a last email. You can say last email, last chance, something, and make it easy for them. So what I like to do is give them options. So option one could be, I'm interested, but I don't have time right now. Reach me in April, let's say. The second one would be could be like sorry, not interested, and the third one could be I'm interested in an interview, but I don't like written interview. Can we do it via? Can we record it and you transcribe it later? So this way they just have to answer 1, 2, 3, and and it's easy for them.
So you just number a few options and then they just reply a number to your email. Okay, interesting. Yeah. You didn't mention before the interview started that you might have some other ideas. We could talk about some other topics related to your expertise and things that you've been experimenting on in terms of life and business and travel hacking. What else comes to your mind that might be interesting to people watching this?
So if people want to reach someone really, really famous and that the techniques we talked about didn't work, I've seen some people do some crazy experiments with ads, and especially Facebook ads about reaching famous people. So on my blog, I have an article that's called "How to Growth Hack Your Job Search," And the end of this article is a part done by my friend Matteo, who, by the way, is doing the Growth Tribe in Amsterdam, the growth program. And what he did when he was trying to find a job is that he created some ads to promote himself. So he targeted specific agencies. So I don't know if he did it via email or via any Facebook interest. He also built a website specially for that with the Facebook pixel to retarget people. So he really did target the people who are trying to recruit him. I've seen other people do kind of similar stuff. So they were trying to reach, for instance, the CEO of a big company, and they weren't getting any answers, and they really needed it for the startup or something. What they did is they targeted the people who worked at the company, and with an image that said, "Do you know this guy?" and the face of the guy they were trying to reach. So all the people from the company who knew him reached out to him and sent him screenshots of this ad that's on Facebook about you and stuff like that, and it worked. So you can get really, really creative if you have to.
How do you get all those ideas? Seriously.
Well, you have to stay in the growth news outlets like growthhackers.com, some Facebook groups like Traffic and Copy, BAMF, Facebook ad hacks, stuff like that. You always get new ideas every day by crazy people.
And do you know, do they say what worked, what didn't work?
Yeah, usually they say what works or what didn't work. So they describe the experiment and then they tell you, okay, it worked, okay, it didn't work, but it was nice, fun trying.
Okay. Other topics that you'd like to talk about? Any other tips, insights that you'd like to share? Do you want to wrap this up?
Maybe about finding emails, because we assume that you had the person's email, but it's not always that easy. So I've actually written a blog post about it. So there are different methods. So in my opinion, the easiest one is just to do a Google search with the good parameters. So with the, how do you say, the hyphens?
The quotes.
The quotes, yeah, exactly. Okay, the quotes and so the @company.com plus the first name, last name. Usually it can have pretty good results. You could also find the contact @companyname.com that you could try, though it would, in most cases, be managed by a gatekeeper. Then you can do some search on Twitter if the person is famous. A tool I use a lot is called Find That Lead. It has a Chrome extension and a dashboard. So you can look for people directly in there or on the LinkedIn profile. Just click on the extension and find their email. Also, if you're connected to a person on LinkedIn, you might have their email on their profile. If not, you can also export your contact list and find their email here. And this is pretty good for ads because it's personal emails most of the time, so it works well. And
there was actually a plugin. I think it's been either discontinued. I'm not certain, but there was a plugin, I think, Hunter.io or something like that would allow you to find emails on LinkedIn.
I used to use it as well. I don't think it has been discontinued, but I think LinkedIn said stop and they had to stop the activities.
So it doesn't work on LinkedIn anymore.
Yeah, so whereas other tools use other techniques to get emails from LinkedIn.
Right.
I also built a Google Sheet where you can input the first name, last name, and domain. And the Google Sheet creates a lot of options of email addresses that you can copy paste in Gmail. And then there is a plugin that's called Rapportive.
Yep.
So it gives you some info about their LinkedIn, and so just put your mouse on the email, and if the Rapportive profile shows, it's a good email. So it takes a bit more time, but it can be pretty useful.
Is that a tool that you made accessible via your website, your blog?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in my how to find anyone's email address.
It's in there. Okay, great. One more thing, through LinkedIn, I mean, my experience has been that most people, you can connect with them without using an email. You can just, I think LinkedIn changed a little bit because before it was it was really forcing you more to know the person's email for a lot more people when depending on their settings. Now it seems like maybe it's just that my I don't know, maybe there's some conditions because I have a lot of connections or whatever reason that now I can do it more easily. But I know that for most people that I want to connect with, there is an option to just connect with the person. And I can add a note or not, but it seems like it's rarely asking me to send an email or blocking me from being, like, asking me for their actual email address before I can send them a message.
Yeah, I think a few years ago you could connect with anyone, and now people in your third plus network, LinkedIn doesn't show you the connect button, but it's hidden in the kind of small menu. I think it's 3 dots.
Yeah, it's there, right?
Yeah, it's there. You can do it.
And you can connect with them without, any requirements, without having to input the email address, for example, right?
Yeah.
Well, which is good. It's good to know because it makes it so much easier to connect with just about anyone that you want. The problem with LinkedIn that I find is that people are slow to respond, right? And they want to switch to email. Once you've connected, usually they'll be like, okay, it's better to reach me via email. The vast majority of, well, let's say half of the people that I've connected with said that. They said email is better, right?
Yeah.
But I think LinkedIn is a good place to at least connect and then, pitch them, either an interview or whatever you're doing, try to give them some value, and then switch over to email. I find personally when I'm getting cold emails and I don't have any information about the person, there's no profile, there's nothing, there's no photo, just like an email address and a name, and I'm getting a cold email, and I rarely get like really personalized emails, right? Usually it's a spam, or bulk email that might be personalized with like my company name or my personal name, but I know that it's basically spam, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how. I guess I'm not famous enough to be getting a lot of personal connection requests and stuff. Maybe you are, but I'm not getting those, so I don't know how I would react to those. But
yeah, and I think LinkedIn has become pretty spammy, especially when you're in the digital marketing world. Some people add you on LinkedIn because they saw you in a LinkedIn on a Facebook group. They add you because they're like a development company based in India and want you to hire them. So it's become pretty noisy. So LinkedIn is trying to change that, but I would say stay away from all the automated LinkedIn outreach and stuff like that, because like it can be good to initiate a conversation, but it doesn't work like any further than that.
Right, and since what you're saying is, building quality relationships with a limited amount of people. You don't want to just spam to everybody and try to connect with everybody. If you want to build quality relationships with like successful, busy people, then you're going to have to be more picky about who you're going to connect with, and also be more spend more time into building that relationship as opposed to just having an automated, response on LinkedIn or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think the key is doing it in the long haul. You're just not just trying to hack something else. It's you're really building relationship with someone that may last for dozens of years while you're still in business. So it's important to do it right.
Let's just look, you and me. We connected originally, I think, through one of your events. I don't remember exactly. Do you remember how we met?
Yeah, actually, I thought about it the other day, and when I started my business school at HEC Montréal, I was in this student association that offered like foreign students internships in Montreal, and I reached out to you, and you were part of Phone Brain at the time.
Yeah.
So actually, the way we met was via a cold outreach, and since then we've collaborated. You've come to the to Montreal Commerce events. We've done interviews, so it's. It starts like that, and then it evolves.
That's it. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it takes time to build a relationship, and things are not going to happen from day one. All of a sudden, you need to give it time, and the relationship will evolve and grow over time, right? And you need to nurture it and keep building it actively. Otherwise, it can also die off if you're not maintaining that relationship.
Yeah, but you can still. That's true, but you can also accelerate it. If you're doing an interview with someone, you're talking with them for an amount of time, you've exchanged about work, so it speeds up the process, I think.
Absolutely. And I think if you connect on a personal level as well, saying you have things in common, or like trying to get to know the person on a more personal level, what their interests are, then I think that's even better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Ambroise, it's been delightful to have you on the show again, and thank you for sharing, your wisdom. Keep experimenting and blogging. It's all great. So thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
All
Have a
right,
nice
have
day.
a great day. Cheers.